In 1970, General Motors put a 450 horsepower engine into an ordinary mid-size sedan. But that number was a lie. GM's own engineers knew the real output was closer to 500. For one single model year, a corporate rule that had protected GM from itself for a decade simply vanished. No memo, no announcement. It just stopped being enforced. The second that door opened, Chevrolet dropped a 454 cubic inch big block into the Chevelle SS and built the most dangerous car GM ever let a regular customer drive off a lot. By the end of this video, you'll know the real horsepower number GM never told the public and why it made this car the greatest muscle car ever built. The rule that wasn't supposed to break. To understand how insane the 1970 Chevelle SS 454 really was, you have to understand the rule it broke and how deeply that rule was baked into General Motors' entire culture. Since the mid-1960s, GM had an internal corporate policy capping engine displacement in its A-body intermediates, cars like the Chevelle, the GTO, and the Cutlass, at 400 cubic inches. On the surface, the reasoning sounded responsible. Keep the big engines in the big cars. Keep the mid-size family cars from turning into missiles that regular commuters had no business driving. But underneath that reasoning was a company terrified of its own liability, watching insurance premiums climb and lawmakers start circling the entire performance car segment. Ford and Chrysler had no such restriction, and they knew exactly what that meant for GM's competitive position. Mopar was already stuffing 440s and full-blown Hemis into Roadrunners and Super Bs, cars that were, on paper, supposed to be affordable and simple. Ford had the 428 Cobra Jet living happily inside the Torino. Meanwhile, GM's own divisions were watching their competitors eat their lunch on the street and at the drag strip, all while corporate policy kept Chevrolet's engineers working with one hand tied behind their backs. Every year that passed, that gap became harder to defend internally. Dealers were losing sales to Dodge and Plymouth showrooms down the street. Engineers were sitting on designs they couldn't build. The frustration inside Chevrolet's performance division was reportedly significant, and it had been building for years. Then, for reasons that are still debated by historians today, the 400 cubic inch cap simply vanished heading into the 1970 model year. Some say it was pressure from Chevrolet's own general manager, pushing back hard against corporate leadership, tired of watching Chevrolet play defense. Some say GM finally admitted internally that they were bleeding too much market share to Detroit's other big players and needed a splash to reverse the narrative. Whatever the real reason, the effect was immediate, and it rippled across the entire GM lineup that year. The instant that ceiling lifted, Chevrolet's engineers reached for the biggest engine sitting on the shelf, the big block 454, and dropped it straight into the Chevelle SS. Pontiac got their 455. Oldsmobile got their 455. Buick got theirs too. But nothing hit quite like what Chevrolet was about to unleash, because Chevrolet didn't stop at just fitting a bigger engine into the same old formula. They built a version of it that was arguably too powerful for its own good, and they built it in a way that made it clear this wasn't a marketing gimmick. This was a genuine engineering statement. Quick side note, most car problems come from small things people overlook. I put together a simple longevity guide based on everything I've learned, and it walks you through exactly what to watch for. It's linked in the description below. The engine they almost didn't let you buy. Here's where the story gets interesting, because the 1970 Chevelle SS 454 actually came in two very different personalities wearing the exact same badge on the same fender. The first was the LS5, a 454 rated at 360 horsepower, a genuinely strong engine that would have been the undisputed star of the show in almost any other muscle car of the era. It was smooth, tractable, and still hit hard enough to embarrass most of what was on the road. But then there was the LS6, and the LS6 changed everything. The LS6 454 was rated at 450 horsepower and 500 pound-feet of torque, numbers that, even by today's standards, sound aggressive for a naturally aspirated engine breathing through a single carburetor. In 1970, they were almost unheard of on a production car you could simply walk into a dealership and order. 11-to-1 compression squeezed every ounce of energy out of premium fuel. A forged steel crankshaft, borrowed straight from heavy-duty truck and marine applications, was built to survive punishment that would snap a cast crank in half. 4-bolt main bearing caps kept the bottom end from tearing itself apart under sustained load at high RPM. A solid lifter camshaft, aggressive and unforgiving, demanded regular valve adjustments and didn't idle politely at a stoplight the way a normal family car engine would. This wasn't an engine built to be comfortable. It wasn't built to be easy to live with. It was built to win, and Chevrolet's engineers seemed to accept that trade-off without hesitation. And here's the detail that a lot of people miss entirely, and it's arguably the most important one in this whole story. Those factory horsepower numbers were almost certainly conservative, and probably deliberately so. This was standard practice across Detroit at the time, not some isolated Chevrolet secret. Insurance companies were starting to circle the muscle car market like sharks circling a wounded fish, and manufacturers had every incentive to underreport horsepower figures to keep premiums from spiraling completely out of control for their customers. Independent dyno testing conducted over the following decades has repeatedly suggested the real output of the LS6 was likely closer to 500 horsepower at the crank, not the 450 stamped onto the window sticker. Chevrolet built a genuine 500 horsepower street car in 1970, sold it to regular Americans walking into regular dealerships, and quietly let the world believe it was 50 horsepower, weaker than it actually was. That's not a small detail to gloss over. That's a company knowingly sitting on one of the most powerful production engines in American history and choosing silence. A hood built to feed the beast. Feeding an engine like that wasn't a simple job, and Chevrolet's engineers knew it long before the car ever reached production. That's where the cowl induction hood comes in, one of the most recognizable and most misunderstood design features on the entire car. Most people look at that raised hood scoop and assume it's just theater, a piece of aggressive styling bolted on to make the car look faster while it's sitting perfectly still in a parking lot. It wasn't. The cowl induction system pulled cooler, denser outside air from the high-pressure zone at the base of the windshield, right where the wiper blades sit, and fed that air directly into the carburetor through a vacuum-operated flap that only opened under hard acceleration. The engineering logic behind it was straightforward, but genuinely clever, and it tells you a lot about how seriously Chevrolet's team was taking this project. Hot air trapped under the hood robs an engine of usable power because heat makes air less dense and less oxygen-rich. Cold air, by contrast, makes real measurable horsepower. By pulling air from the cowl instead of the sweltering engine bay sitting right on top of a 454, Chevrolet's engineers found free performance without touching a single internal engine component. It's exactly the kind of quiet, thoughtful engineering that a lot of casual fans never think twice about, but it's precisely what separates the Chevelle SS 454 from cars that simply look tough on the outside and don't back it up once the light turns green. And Chevrolet didn't stop there. The SS 454 could be optioned with rally wheels, dual exhaust routed to control both sound and back pressure, staggered rear shocks specifically engineered to fight wheel hop under hard launches, a heavy-duty suspension package built to handle the extra weight over the front axle, and a choice between a turbo hydromatic automatic or a genuine Muncie 4-speed manual for buyers who wanted total control. Every single piece of it was built around one singular unapologetic purpose: getting all of that torque down to the pavement without the car tearing itself apart in the process, and doing it in a way that a regular customer could actually manage on the way home from work. The numbers that scared the competition. So what did all of this actually translate to once the car hit real pavement? This is where the Chevelle SS 454 stopped being an impressive spec sheet and started becoming a genuine legend. Period magazine testing put the LS6-equipped Chevelle SS 454 running the quarter mile in the low 13-second range, with some tests reporting times as quick as 13.44 seconds at well over 100 miles per hour, all on the factory-supplied bias-ply tires of the era. Tires that were nowhere near as sticky or as forgiving as anything a car would ride on today. For context, those numbers were competitive with purpose-built race cars from just a few years earlier in that same decade. This was a car you could option at your local Chevrolet dealership, finance over 3 years, drive off the lot on a Saturday afternoon, and take straight to the Strip that same weekend. Car and Driver, Motor Trend, and Hot Rod Magazine all ran extensive comparison tests throughout 1970, pitting the Chevelle head-to-head against the Hemi Roadrunner, the Buick GSX, the Ford Torino Cobra, and the Pontiac GTO Judge. Almost every single one of those tests came back with the same conclusion, sometimes to the visible frustration of the testers themselves. In a straight line, on pump gas, right off the showroom floor, nothing else in Detroit's entire lineup could consistently keep pace with the LS6 Chevelle. Some testers even suggested that the LS6 in the right hands was quicker in real-world conditions than the vaunted Hemi cars that had built their entire reputation, their entire mythology, on straight-line dominance alone. That's not a small claim to make in print. The Hemi was supposed to be untouchable, the undisputed king of the Strip. The Chevelle SS 454 touched it, and in more than a few cases, it beat it clean. And here's a detail that gets lost in most retellings of this story. This wasn't a car that needed a professional driver, a prepped track surface, and ideal weather to hit those numbers. Regular buyers, weekend racers, and street enthusiasts across the entire country were pulling similar times with nothing more than bolt-on modifications and completely stock internals. The margin for error GM built into that drivetrain was enormous, which is exactly why so many of these cars survived decades of hard use, hard abuse, and questionable decision-making by teenage owners and are still out there running strong today. If you're the kind of gearhead who lives for numbers like this, hit that like button right now. Drop a comment telling me which muscle car you think could have actually hung with the LS6 in a real street race, and make sure you're subscribed with that notification bell turned on, because we've got a lot more of this kind of deep dive content coming, and you genuinely do not want to miss it. A car so rare, most owners never knew what they had. Here's the part of this story that genuinely surprises even seasoned muscle car fans. Despite the legendary reputation the LS6 Chevelle SS 454 carries today, Chevrolet actually built shockingly few of them relative to overall Chevelle production. Documented production figures put genuine LS6-equipped 1970 Chevelles at right around 4,475 units, a remarkably tiny fraction of the total Chevelle SS production run that year. Most SS 454 buyers actually walked out of the dealership with the LS5, the 360 horsepower version, which was still a serious, credible performance car in its own right, but nowhere near the outright ferocity of its big brother. That rarity created a strange and lasting problem decades later, once these cars became collectible. Because so few people ordered the LS6 specifically back in 1970, and because Chevrolet's build sheets and dealer paperwork from that era were often incomplete, poorly stored, or simply lost to time, verifying a genuine LS6 Chevelle today has become a genuine forensic exercise. Collectors look for specific casting numbers stamped into the block, correct cowl tag codes hidden under the hood, the original build sheet if it happened to survive tucked under the back seat for 50 years, and a matching VIN derivative that ties the engine directly to the car it left the factory bolted into. Fake LS6 clones have been a persistent, well-documented problem in the collector market for years, built from lesser Chevelles with a swapped-in engine and an optimistic story attached. It's honestly a testament to how special the real thing was that people have spent decades and small fortunes trying to recreate it convincingly. And there's another wrinkle to this story that a lot of casual fans never hear about. Chevrolet's own official factory literature for 1970 listed the LS6's rating at 450 horsepower, full stop. But internal Chevrolet engineering memos that surfaced decades later through collector and historian research reportedly suggested the division's own engineers privately believed the real output was significantly higher than that, information that never made it past Chevrolet's public relations department. Publishing a bigger, more honest number would have handed insurance companies and safety regulators exactly the ammunition they needed to come down hard on the entire muscle car segment overnight. Sound familiar? It's the same quiet game every manufacturer in Detroit was playing that year behind closed doors, and the Chevelle SS 454 was sitting right at the center of it, arguably with the most to hide of any car on the market. Why? This is the one. So let's go back to where we started. A corporate rule that was never supposed to break, quietly ignored for a single model year. An engine built with numbers that were almost certainly underreported on purpose to protect the company. A hood scoop that wasn't just for looks, but a genuine, thoughtful piece of performance engineering hiding in plain sight. Quarter-mile times that embarrassed cars with twice the reputation and twice the mythology behind them. And a production run so small that finding a real one today is closer to detective work than ordinary car shopping. That's what makes the 1970 Chevelle SS 454 the greatest muscle car ever built. It wasn't the product of some carefully planned 5-year engineering roadmap handed down from committee. It was the product of a single loophole, a small temporary window where General Motors' own internal rules briefly stopped getting in the way of what its engineers had wanted to build all along. For one model year, and one model year only, Chevrolet built the car it had genuinely wanted to build the entire decade, and then the window closed for good. Insurance companies caught up fast. Emissions regulations tightened hard. Horsepower numbers across the entire American auto industry started shrinking almost overnight as the new decade wore on. The Chevelle SS 454 wasn't just a great muscle car sitting in a crowded field. It was the last full, uncompromised breath of an era that was already ending as the car rolled off the St. Louis and Baltimore assembly lines. Every other muscle car from this golden period has its own case to make, and plenty of them make it well. The Hemi Cuda has the mystique and the movie star looks. The GTO has the history of starting the entire segment from scratch. The Boss 429 has the NASCAR pedigree and the racing bloodline. But none of them combined raw, underreported power, genuine engineering thoughtfulness, and street-proven magazine-documented dominance quite the way the LS6 Chevelle did, all at once, in a single package. It didn't just compete in the muscle car war of 1970. For one brief, brutal, unforgettable model year, it won it outright, and it did so quietly, without ever telling the public the full truth about what was really under that hood. And that's the story of why the 1970 Chevelle SS 454 isn't just another fast car from Detroit's golden era sitting in a museum somewhere. It's the car that showed up right when the rules briefly stopped applying, and it made the absolute most of every single second that window stayed open. Now I genuinely want to hear from you. If you owned or ever rode in an SS 454, what do you remember about it most? Was it the sound rolling through those dual exhaust tips, the way it pulled hard and kept pulling right up until you finally lifted off the gas? Or just the sheer physical presence of that cowl induction hood staring back at you in the rearview mirror of whatever else happened to be on the road that day? Drop that story in the comments below. I read every single one, and honestly, some of the best facts that end up in future videos come straight from conversations right here in this comment section. If this is the kind of deep dive you want more of, real history, real engineering, real stories from the cars that actually built American car culture from the ground up, make sure you're subscribed and that notification bell is turned on, because we've got more of these coming every single week, and some of the topics coming up are going to surprise you. And if you haven't already, go back and check out our breakdown on why the 1969 Corvette might be the greatest Vetta ever made. It's a perfect companion piece to this one, built the exact same way, and I think you're genuinely going to love it. Thanks for riding along with us today. We'll see you in the next one.